How's it going, everybody? I'm glad you're here, and today we're going to be talking about Knock at the Cabin, directed by M. Night Shyamalan and starring Dave Bautista, Jonathon Groff, and Ben Aldridge. While vacationing at a remote cabin, a young girl and her parents are taken hostage by four armed strangers who demand that their family make an unthinkable choice to avert the apocalypse. With limited access to the outside world, the family must decide what they believe before all is lost. Now, when you see a trailer for a film like this, and you see the name M. Night Shyamalan attached, many people are going to have many different reactions. Many people are going to shudder in terror, many people are going to be cautiously optimistic, and others are going to be balls to the wall excited. Most of the time when I see a trailer with M. Night Shyamalan attached, I fall somewhere in between cautiously optimistic and balls to the wall excited. For this one, I will admit that I was pretty balls to the wall excited. His last film, Old, which, as usual with many M. Night Shyamalan films, was pretty controversial in terms of its opinions. Many people loved it, many people hated it, many people thought it was stupid, many people thought it was genius. I had a lot to enjoy about that movie. It was intentionally crazy and intentionally goofy, and I had a great time. It had tons of problems, but I really enjoyed that film. It was also very frustrating. I talked a lot on Letterboxd and on this channel in my end of the year video for 2021, how important it was for M. Night Shyamalan to find himself a writing partner, because M. Night Shyamalan is a phenomenal idea man, and he is an incredibly talented and innovative director, but when it comes to dialogue, he is incredibly lacking, and since the beginning of his career, he has gone downhill. He's capable of writing good dialogue, it's just in his past few movies, it really hasn't shown, and I was saying that if he got himself a writing partner, it would most likely elevate his new projects. Now, color me surprised that since now he has two writing partners on this film, this is his best script written since at least Signs, if not Split or Unbreakable. The reason I say Split before Signs is because obviously the script for Split was written in the early 2000s and the movie wasn't made until 2016. But besides the point, this is M. Night's best film in years, his best film since at the very least Split, if not Signs. And the biggest reason for that is his dialogue is immensely improved, partly thanks to his new writing partners. It's still got its classic M. Night Shyamalan quirks, it's got some weirdly placed humor, and it's got some weird dialogue, but overall this film has definitely improved in the dialogue department for M. Night's previous films. And because of that, the acting by default has also exponentially improved. Many of the times in his films where the acting isn't great, it's not really the actor's fault, it's mostly the dialogue's fault. Especially in his last film, Old, the dialogue in Old was really strange, and as a result, the performances faltered, but they weren't bad actors in the movie. It's just the dialogue was a little bit weird. And in this movie, there are a few moments of weird dialogue, but the performances are much better. And you know that it's the dialogue because 95% of the time the performances are great. It's just when they're required to say a weird joke or a weird Shyamalan-esque dialogue trope, that's the only time the performances really falter. So the acting in this film is also quite great and a lot better than many of Shyamalan's previous works. With that being said, Rupert Grint is by far the worst actor in this movie, and that sucks because he was one of the actors I was most excited to see in this movie, but he's definitely the worst actor. His accent is very inconsistent. He's trying to do an American Southern accent, but it does not work at all, and his line delivery is very over-exaggerated. He kind of plays a caricature of the character he's trying to play. Everybody else around him is much better than him, and that's what makes him stand out the most. Everybody else in the movie does a really good job. The little girl, Kristen, I think is her name, she really impressed me. For a child actress, and for a child actress in a Shyamalan movie, she really impressed me. I think she's going to do great things later on in her career. Dave Bautista was great. This is one of my favorite performances from him as well. I'm not completely familiar with the rest of the actors' work in this movie, but I thought everybody in this film did a really good job, except for Rupert Grint, which sucks, but the good definitely outweighs the bad in the performances department. And as I mentioned, as usual with Shyamalan movies, this film is directed with such innovation and such utter insanity at times that the entire time I was watching the film, I was just fascinated by all the choices Shyamalan was making. He does so much cool stuff with the camera here. Not all of it works, but even when it doesn't work, I was really impressed with the effort that he was able to put in and the ideas he was able to make with such a contained environment. This film doesn't entirely take place in one room, but it's still a very contained movie. The vast majority of this film takes place in the living room of this cabin, and Shyamalan does a really good job at keeping us invested in this story with his crazy directing choices and with his ideas. His cameo in this movie is one of my favorites of his ever. It's quite funny, and it works really well for the story. You'll know it obviously when you see him, but it worked really well for me. It was funny. Like I said, for the most part, he does a phenomenal job of keeping us invested. There's probably a 10 to 15 minute chunk in the second act where I was a little bit disinvested from the rest of the story in comparison to the rest of the film, just because it had been a little while since something big happened and I was starting to lose interest. And that the only reason I bring that up is because the rest of the movie is so noticeably better at maintaining that tension and maintaining those thrills and keeping us guessing till the very end, that 10 to 15 minute chunk was really noticeable because the rest of the time I was fully on board. And what's cool about this movie is you never know where it's going. The film consistently surprises you with its choices, because the three endings that could happen for this movie in and of themselves are pretty ballsy endings. You just have the apocalypse happen and everyone die because they don't kill anybody. They do kill somebody and they save the world, or they do kill somebody and the world was not going to end all along and these people were just freaking crazy. All of these scenarios are pretty ballsy, and they're really the only three scenarios that can possibly happen. And so the whole time you're watching the film, you're wondering where they're going to go, and where they do wind up going is something I kind of want to talk about. And I'm not going to get into spoilers. Obviously, this is a spoiler-free video, but it's widely known that the ending of this film is different from the book. And that's not a problem. I'm obviously not a fan of the book. I've never read it. And what they do here didn't bother me at all, but the film wraps up very, very quickly. The film kind of builds and builds and builds and builds, and it builds for a long time, and you're starting to wonder how it's going to end because you're nearing the end so quickly. And then the climax just kind of happens, and then the film just kind of ends, and it all feels very, very rushed. And that was my biggest issue with the movie, is the final 10 to 15 minutes is very, very rushed. They kind of toy with what the ending's going to be. In the first half of the movie, they kind of hint at what they're going to do, but they don't hint at it enough for the quick ending to feel justified in how quick it is. I didn't mind what they did, but I feel like they could have spent a little bit more time getting us there. Maybe take that 10 to 15 minute chunk in the middle and devote some of that to developing what the ending's gonna be. Also, there's a few flashback sequences in this movie that are integral for the themes that this movie explores. And the themes that this movie explores are very classic Shyamalan, but they're also done in a very different way from other times that Shyamalan has explored these themes. Shyamalan loves to explore themes of family and nostalgia and the importance of cherishing the loved ones around you and appreciating what you have. And he does that here as well, and he does it in a unique way. And I understand why these flashback sequences are necessary, but it does kind of throw off the pacing, because you'll be in the middle of something really, really intense happening in the cabin, a really key integral scene, and then legitimately in the middle of a fight scene, you'll cut to a flashback. And you kind of think to yourself, what would have changed if you just waited 30 more seconds to place that flashback scene in? Because then I would be more invested, because I would have known how that previous scene concluded and I'd be ready to move on. With what it does here, it feels a little bit more jarring than it probably should have. But those are really my only major issues with this movie. It explores some really cool themes. There's some really great symbolism. There's lots of visual motifs that are really great. It's a phenomenally directed movie, as usual with Shyamalan's films. It's got a much better script than normal. There's still some wonky stuff, but that's expected with Shyamalan. He's intentionally corny a lot of the time. There's some really bad CGI towards the end of this movie, but it's not a huge deal because it's not a very CGI-heavy film. That's the biggest reason why you notice it, is because there's not a lot of CGI in the film. But I thought this was a great concept, translated very well onto the screen, and the changes that he does make, even though they felt rushed, I did like the changes. I like the ending that's in the book that I've been told how the book ends, and I like the ending to this movie. I just wish it wasn't as rushed as it did. But all in all, I had a great time with this movie. Many people are probably not going to like it, because I know not a lot of people are a fan of Shyamalan's style, but I am, and he definitely cleaned up his act here. This is one of his best films in years. I'm going to give Knock at the Cabin a 7 out of 10. I highly recommend you check it out this weekend, because regardless of whether or not you like Shyamalan's films, he's always a director that will have a friend in me. I will see anything he does. I greatly respect him and admire his work, and I think this is one of his better films in a long time. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you've seen Knock at the Cabin already, let me know what you think down below in the comment section. If you haven't seen it yet, let me know what you think of it when you go see it this weekend. It comes out Friday, February 3rd. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.